for this session, what we're going to cover is talking about progression systems, rewards, and things like that. And if we have time, I wouldn't mind demoing, or at least trying to refresh myself on how to do the IWP reward system. There is, some really turnkey stuff in the public assets that makes just doing, granting reward and things that super easy. So I would love to show those if we have time. But this session is an AMA. So ideally, if you have questions, feel free to, drop them in the chat. Let's get started. What are some common ways to handle progression in mobile games, right? And so that's based on the idea of, if you have people in your life, there's a chance you have somebody in your life who has played a mobile game, or you yourself has played a mobile game, and you when you stop and think, what is it that is what they're seeing that is, leveling up or getting more of, and it's what's bringing them back to play some more, right? So that's what comes to mind, right? So you think of things, in as a more recent trend has been deck builders, right? Where you're getting new cards and you're filling out your collections, right? There's also, the classic stars on Angry Birds, right? You did this well, and so you get, if you didn't do too good, you get 1 star. If you did a little better, you get 2. You get, you did the perfect amount, then you get your 3 stars, right? And then the other classic, right? Of think RPGs or just things in general where you are sort of gaining power as the longer you play, right? Often those are tied to levels, right? And these levels, depending on how complex your system is, they might just be giving you straight attributes. As you level, you just get more power, right? Especially you see that in these games that have that randomized aspect whenever you replay them, right? Where it's as you play, as you go through each level, you're sort of getting some random attributes that help you. Those are that genre, if you're not familiar with it, is called or roguelites, and they're, based on the idea of having randomized sessions as you're going through. So that is a version of progression, right? So something to take into account too is what is the way that you want to handle your progression in your game as far as persistence goes, right? So think, does the player leave and come back and have the same level? Do they just go through, a session? Let's say, if we're thinking mobile, what is that? 5, 15 minutes? How long are they really going to play for, right? And in that time, what are we going to make them feel as far as how they're progressing through the game? So that's the things you want to sort of think about, and we'll keep talking about those throughout the rest of these questions too. So those should pop up. Yeah, I see Beatrice saying experience points as a reward system. Right, right. And so that's, another thing that kind of feeds into levels, right? So uh, let me see what you got here. So since it's mobile, does it have to be a short game? That's a really good question, Beatrice. So it doesn't have to be, but what you can expect that, most players on mobile, what is their sort of intention when they're playing the game, right? If you just think of the people around you, your friends, or even yourself, right? How often do you find yourself playing a mobile game and for how long, right? In my experience, yeah, I'll see my wife, she'll sit down for the evening, right before bed, maybe 30-minute session. But she's pretty hardcore uh, of playing hyper casual matching game, right? I think of me, Duolingo, it's not a game as a game is, but every day I play for 5 minutes guaranteed every day. So I'm on my 715th day of playing. And so that is my progression system too, right? I only need 5 minutes and I feel good. I can look at my streak and all that. So that's just the way you want to think about it. But there are people who might play a Fortnite session, right? And it's like, that might be a little longer than 15 minutes. It might be right up there, right around 15, 30 minutes. But that's a good way to sort of time box it, especially when, you're thinking about what all do you want to offer to the player from a progression standpoint of what I'll go into later in this call is the beats of what is happening moment per moment, and what are you showing them moment per moment that allows them to sort of feel that stickiness and go, I want to come back and do that again. So let's see, what do we got here? So I was confused if XP should be reset or not with leveling up. Yeah. Yeah, that's the fun sort of new way of doing things is these with the popularity that they have is that's basically people kind of saying, with those being popular, it's okay, that's a way several people to enjoy the game. They totally don't mind if the XP restarts, but maybe you offer them a bonus when they start again, right? You see that Vampire Survivors, right? One of the most popular kind of games where you straight up lose everything. Just a Minecraft, right? You lose all your stuff, but and there you lose everything. You start the game again, and there you have to, and then on your next playthrough, you're picking a character that has different stats, right? But you earned it through playing, a certain amount and gaining the currency to unlock those characters. Yeah, that's so it's very interesting. Let's see. I can follow a storyline for the world. Oh yeah, that's another great concept too. I recently was, I mean, just in general, right? If you think about story-based mobile games too, think of, I don't know, this is the worst example that could have popped in my head. Let me not be hateful. I'm thinking the Kim Kardashian game, so it's, very much these little story beats, right? Where it kind of feels just like the ideas you have just these moments of role play, right? Of here's conversation between dialogue between characters or whatever, and so they are. It's feeding it to you in mini episodes. That's what I mean to say. It's mini episodes. So that's another good way to handle storylines in mobile, right? And that also is progression, right? It's somebody getting through a story straight up. That's progression. And so let's see. So we've got, and for the XP, we're going to learn how to do that on the world editor. We can. Well, I could just jump straight to that. I was going to leave it as a surprise, but I'll give you an appetizer. So basically, this last question here is how do I make an XP bar? So as of last night, I went ahead and shared a a version one. So, if it's not working quite right, let me know in the Discord or in the forums, whatever. Just tag me wherever you can reach me at Tellous. And so you can you can pull that public asset out. And basically my goal there was to sort of take this XP system that I'm working on in a game with Immortal and offer it out so that people can kind of see how that's structured with animated bindings and sort of switching up the bindings so that it causes the XP bar to fill up and then have a moment for animation and stuff like that. So feel free to pull that out and dabble in that. If we have time, I can even pull that out here later. I'd really love to show y'all the shop gizmo or the shop asset and inventory asset that exists if we get around to that. And for some of you, that might be a refresher. I have shown some of you already, and yeah, it's always exciting to share. So I'd love to do it with the group too. So let's keep talking here. So let's see what we've got. We've got, when we're talking Horizon Worlds, we're talking player persistent variables, really, when we're talking about what we're going to leverage when they leave and come back, right? So if we want, we probably want the player to have some sort of thing that they come back to and can really enjoy on their return visit. And so this, P player persistent variables, PPVs, are what allow for that, right? And so the the two main ways that you create a PPV, right, is either it's a number or it's an object, right? And so like number might be good for like pretty basic things. If you think of just stuff that you track on the leaderboard, I'm sure a lot of you already know this, right? So that's just like score and things like that. It's just a nice way to handle it, right? And so what might you do um as a reward for something so simple like a data point that's tracked so simply, right? It's like what I like to like envision in my mind is those donation thermometers that you sometimes see, and I don't know if sometimes you see movies or like if you've worked a corporate job and it's okay, we're donating the thing, and every time we donate it fills the thermometer. I don't know why that comes to mind, but that in itself, seeing there is just one number there, really, it's donation amount, right? Or in the case of donating food for Thanksgiving, it's the weight of the food, right? So it's coming in and seeing that changing, right, is a cool way that you could sort of show progression, not necessarily in games, but that's something in real life where we see that people react to that in a way that's positive. That's, ooh, I want to check again and see what changed, right? So there's, think of the creative ways that your game might consider that. And then the object side of things, that's where it gets interesting, right? That's where you can start to have these different properties of kill count, death count, or if you're doing kind of PvP style or those kinds of games, XP amount, right? And so you're just storing all these different things in an object. It can even have a correlation to maybe colors that they unlocked and they have saved, right? Or maybe there is an object that is all the unlockables of the game, and you're just toggling the flags and saying, let's say there's a red pair of wings, a blue pair of wings, a green pair of wings, right? And so then there's has unlocked, right? And the cost of it. So you can introduce those as part of the PPV, right? Now, that makes me want to jump back to this question, right? What gameplay changes should you consider, right? And so when we're thinking PPVs, you need to be mindful about that those operations to save that data, especially when we're talking about object PPVs, that can be a heavier operation, right? So you need to think about moments in the game where you can space out time, right? You can say, here is where, gameplay is just going to be a little inactive. People can kind of move around and, uh, you know, there'll be there'll be space for them um, to move around, but allows you the resources to make sure that you don't cause hitches because of your wanting to save the PPVs, right? That's just a way to sort of maximize on optimization, right? Sometimes it's not going to happen that way, right? Sometimes we do have to take the hit and we just have to be as optimized in other spaces as possible, right? For example, I mean, well, if you think of an action RPG where the player is sort of able to explore the space and collect things and do things, you there might be a need to do something immediately, right? Save that data immediately. But something think a lemonade stand style game, right? Where it's you do all your stuff in the day and then sort of save the day or end the day, there's an action that the player can take to trigger that, right? And so that's where, you black out the screen and you say, the day is ending. Boom, that's where you save all the data. You've minimized the amount of space that the player can move and stuff like that. So that's one way you can consider sort of making gameplay change. Um, think of rounds in a first person shooter or something like that where maybe you're doing the fight. And then after, when you send everybody to the lobby, you add a little bit of a timer before they can start the next round so that you can do all your heavier operations in that space in regards to progression. Let me take a look at the chat over here. So you got curious about the shop and inventory gizmos, if they could be useful if I have my custom inventory. Yeah, so Natasha, I've seen your custom inventory. So you basically built out that thing. So it kind of conflicts, right? It's an either or, but it might make sense for you if you're especially just kind of jumping to that part of the discussion of this session is for that shop and inventory system. What is the most beneficial thing about it is that it's meta credits first, right? So it's the idea of, often, especially if you're a legacy creator, you've probably built systems that are based on your earning currency as part of the game, right? So let me kind of just yeah, I'll leave it at that. You're earning currency as part of the game, right? And so then you're offering to the player, here's a shop where you can spend that currency, right? And so it's very much tied to a player persistent variable. But this shop asset and inventory asset, even daily rewards asset, comes at it from a Metacredits first approach, which I can really appreciate because that allows the flexibility to say, yes, my players could support me monetarily if that is what they're interested in. But I will offer the ability to select the in-game credits for that item, right? So that's a great flexibility to have where the other, when you go in-game currency first, then you kind of got to figure out how are you going to put it, how are you going to mix the IWP with the PPV stuff, and that can be a little tricky. So yeah, if it's already working for you though, great. Keep going with your inventory system, unless you really want the meta credit side of things, then just spend some time thinking about how that might look as almost like you can have it as a different system that kind of pulls in and you start to remove your previous inventory system. So maybe having like some way of balancing both at the same time might take some magic around hiding the custom UI that comes with the existing or uh, the public asset version of it. So let's see. Any tips on maximizing CPU usage when it comes to creating the mobile games? Yes, but I think that one, so if I remember correctly, I'm so here, I'll give you a quick concept around that. So to preface, this session will be mostly focused on progression. And so that idea of doing the heavy operations stuff, that's kind of a way to think about CPU overload and stuff like that. When it comes to like general CPU overload, just the quick and easy of it is to make sure you're auditing the update loops that you're doing in your world and make sure that you are being mindful of the physics and general stuff that you're like displaying in the world, models and stuff like how many models and their whether their collisions are turned on and sort of trying to balance making sure you're not doing too much on the GPU side because that will also show up as like, you're just basically your CPU is waiting for your GPU at that point. So update loops is typically the one of the main ones you want to look at, and bridge calls too, which is anytime you're doing a dot get, things like that. So that is, I can't, if anybody has more links on that, I know there's documentation around that that might be more helpful. But let's keep going with progression systems. Let's see. So we got, should I be selling my in-world currency in my shop? So that's the thing, Natasha. If you're thinking about that, that's a very much go check out this public asset, and we'll do that here in this call at some point. Uh, so yeah, so if that's already itching at you, you may want to consider even just throw up a blank world and you'll see exactly how we do that here in a bit. So curious if you have any design thoughts on how to craft the progression system with a meaningful gameplay output impact without destroying balance and competitive gameplay. How can you prevent experienced players with a lot of progress from totally overpowering new players and ruining the fun? Okay, so that one, you've triggered my slide 8. So yeah, so that is this. I wrote it as when should I level up the player? And I think I more approached that when I initially wrote this question, I was more so thinking about it from a as a game developer, I want who is focused on retention, right? Because you have to think about what are your goals, right? So if my goal is retention, then I'm thinking about level up in the sense of making sure that the player feels they want to spend more time and what are the moments in between, right? So quite literally, I'm going to track it from a timeline perspective, right? If I might just say baseline, I want my players to be there for 30 hours, right? So what happens when I straight up put on a whiteboard, 0 minutes to 30 hours, right? Now I can split up that in between and start to list out what can they expect to see in those moments. And I'm not going to dwell too long on that version of it because I think your question's more so based on the actual gameplay stuff. So in that regard, right, that means my goal is giving the players a sense. So retention is going to mostly come from the players are highly competitive, right? Right. And so it's the idea of they need to feel like things are fair. And so what I do want to preface with something that I am sort of noticing that might be a non-answer, kind of like discrediting the answer a little, but I do want to get into the way you're asking it. But I do notice that some of the younger players, especially when you look at Roblox games and even Fortnite UGC maps, what you do see is that there is this sort of absurdity to leveling, like to progression in those systems, and that the people, the younger players, are more so treating the experience as a way to sort of connect to each other, as opposed to like this idea of really it being super fair, right? In the UGC realm. Now, if you think Fortnite, vanilla Fortnite, or even zero build or the other mode, the first person, those fairness matters, right? Call of Duty, right? Any of those kinds of games, Street Fighter, where competition matters. What do we see from those games, right? It's straight up cosmetics, right? It's always been cosmetics. There's just you just give them, a pretty hat. And that's often where they feel the balance is left to the game itself. But if you're trying to do where the progression uh, quite literally affects their attributes. But the idea of giving the players a challenge. Yeah, think of, needing to craft the thing, right? So, there's just this aspect of I have to like, there's a lot of work that I have to put in to really use the reward, but I now have the access to do that challenge, right? It's a way to sort of say like, well, the other players might be like, well, you have that thing, but I know what it took to do that, right? Think Destiny 2, right? If you think of the player versus player that occurs there, right? A lot, even World of Warcraft too, is this aspect of the player has to go do these raids, do these intense sessions of like group sessions to gain the reward, right? When they bring that reward to the player versus player, sometimes there's effects that take place that are like, maybe it's that it doesn't really affect your attributes too much, or it affects them in a different way when you're in the PvP setting. But to have gotten that reward, you had to go through the gauntlet of the many hour raid and things like that. So that's what I think I see often out in the real world, if you will. So I guess in Horizon Worlds, when thinking about mobile, you know, maybe puzzles that feel, pretty brain challenging, and having them be multi-tiered, right? There's easy, medium, hard, be a way that players can feel like, okay, well, they didn't just like, swipe the card and just can destroy me now. Just remember that Roblox does have that, and it's quite popular where people just go, yeah, I'll spend the Roblox and be absurdly powerful. My goal is to just meet people who want to be silly in this space, and that works. So let's see here. What do we have? So let me backtrack just a bit. Okay, so how do I give rewards to player? Yeah, we kind of touched on that, and then we're teasing the idea of like a public asset too. So, is there anything that can be unlockable reward that someone who isn't a partner can have in their world? Unlockable reward that someone who isn't a partner can have in the world and use across worlds. Ooh, okay. Okay, so is it the case that currently variable groups are the sharing of that is only a partner thing? Is that still the case? Avatar outfit reward. Variable groups is available to all. Okay. Well, that answers your question, Starpool. So if you have I mean, it answers the across the world part. I'm not sure I'm quite catching that first part. I believe they're all available. Okay, great. Can be unlockable reward someone who isn't a partner can have in their world. I'd like to make a t-shirt. Oh, okay, okay, okay. Well, that's rolling out. It'll eventually get to everybody, right? So as far as that goes, keep planning on it, right? And once it's there and you have all your plans in place, then boom, you'll jump on it and have your stuff ready to go. So, um, yeah, don't let things that aren't out yet stop you from dreaming. So, as far as being able to just unlock things in general, that is sort of going back to that idea of just checking player persistent variables and seeing if they've met the certain thresholds of whatever your reward counts are. Then you can either spawn them in, or if you have them already in world, you assign them to the player. Things like that. You can set the grab ability to only that player with like script assignee. Those are ways that to actually like literally give them the reward. Let's see. So can we reward the player with a hat that they can have in any Horizon world in Meta Horizon app? No, not at the moment. Right, exactly. Craze gotcha. But yeah, let me try to get this talk about this point here that I have on the screen. So how do I randomize rewards? This is going to be more on the scripting side of things, right? Think that, there is basically a math random function that you can call that's going to, by default, it's going to give you a number between 0 and not 1, but less than 1, 0.99, I believe. So the way I often do the like thresholds and things like that is like basically I'm just gonna say if it's less than zero point 0.1, right? Which is basically saying if it's less than 10%, then give them this, right? If it's less than 20%, then give them this, right? And so I'm just gonna do different tiers. That's a quick and dirty way. I'm sure there's more interesting systematic ways of doing it from that feels like a chat GPT question of being, what patterns, design patterns could I use for creating randomized rewards. But basically, all I'm trying to say here is if you think about it from when you're using math random, that you're sort of saying below certain percentages, you give a specific reward, then you just have this big if else tree of stuff. that can exist in as a function in whatever script you're sort of granting these rewards from. So let's see, what do we have? So can I give IWPs as rewards? That's a teaser. So yeah, so that's definitely, we'll go into that here. I want to move quickly so I can actually demo that shop system. And here it says, how do I show off rewards? Okay, so this part right here, this slide deals with that second portion of the competition, right? The second important detail of that competition, which is shareable moments, right? And you know, yes, the game can have many shareable moments, but don't forget the action of giving a person a reward is also a shareable moment, right? That moment where you can shine down the thing coming from the reward coming down onto the player's hand. Uh, maybe that's a literal, but put it on their side and have this sort of, yeah, you got this, right? The combination of both custom UI plus camera modes, right? Thinking about how you can just, when they receive the rewards, place the camera in such a way where it looks a cutscene, right? It looks a fun little rewarding cutscene. Think of when they finish top three, right? In PvP kind of thing, right? Where you have a moment where they're standing on the podium and the camera's just fixed for a moment, right? And they have them run around. That's rewarding too, to kind of be standing up in the podium. There's also the idea of, maybe you want to even consider doing a sort of, when they enter a space where there is a reward to get, that you're sort of, swinging the camera around an item, right? So you're setting the camera to attach, and you're setting the offset so that you can kind of spin the camera around the reward, and then just give the camera back to the, third person or first person, whatever you're doing. Uh, Essentially making sure that the player knows that the reward exists. Let's see. So we got some questions in the chat. So how do player actually share this moment? Making a screenshot on a phone, recording. Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, I think they do have the the ability to record or take a picture on mobile, right? So that is, yeah, that is the moment. So that's a thing to think about, right? Is like, think about giving a little more pause in those moments where a person can go, oh, I can take this picture or whatever. Even if it's not available on the screen, they might be able to, hit their screenshot button on their phone, or, pull out their recorder. So just like making sure you're allowing for that space for the person to be, oh yeah, I got to do this. Or another thing to think about is like making sure that moment also repeats enough and is predictable enough so that they do know to do it next time, right? And tying it to like events that make you want to go, man, I want to take a picture of that. That felt awesome. It's not, you don't want to do it for every single thing. They pick up a controller, they walk into a doorway, right? It's not every single thing. It's that moment of celebration that you want to make sure you're considering. For the rest of this time, I am going to try demoing this shop asset. So wish me luck. Let's see. I've only done it like 100 times. But 101 times, that's when they get you. So I'm going to pull all the ones that are relevant out. So I'm just going to search in the asset library here in the bottom. Just going to search for shop. It's this little purple one here. And I believe this was 3 release notes ago that this came out, maybe 4. Inventory. And daily rewards. Okay. So a quick scan of these 3 items here will show you. Okay. First things first. Oh, did it fix? Ooh, I'd love to see that. It seems like it. Let me see. Let me just double check. I don't trust it. I'm gonna write a test script here, just to make sure that there's this bug that sometimes happens where the scripts don't all load in. So okay, I think that's all of them. So I'll just delete that test script. And basically, if you ever see broken ref in your attached scripts, as a workaround right now, you can just create a new test script, delete it after. That seems to help with loading in the stuff. So quick scan of all these assets. We've got this shop here that has this shop script, inventory that has this inventory script, and daily rewards, which has this daily rewards. Okay. I'm going to switch over to the console just because I know there's like some persistent variables that are required. I see it here, so I'm gonna add it now. So let's do, I think I already have a group called that, so let me just pull that group in. Owned by me shop. Okay, no, I don't. Cool. So let's make a new one called shop. And you can change it to whatever, right? This is just a string input. So you can change it to whatever your variable group is. I'm going to follow the one that shows so that next time I demo this, it's already ready to go. So this says daily rewards, and that is a number, I hope. Yes, it might be an object, actually. Let me show you how I distinguish that. So I'm going to edit the script, and I'm going to do a Control F, Control Shift F, just in case it's not in this file. We're going to write daily rewards. Actually, we're going to write store daily rewards. Oh, you know what? It's a property. So let's look at the property name. So we're going to look at the class. Let's do 0, daily rewards. Are you the class? No, it didn't say component. It is. It is the right one. Okay, here we go. Static prop definition. The shortcut to fold everything was Control K0, by the way, if you need that. We are looking for persistent, this one right here. Well, let's search for that. So let's find where it gets used. Okay. So here, so I'm going down the rabbit hole to see which kind of persistent variable it's expecting to be. So here, so okay, here I just randomly picked this line, and what I can discern from this is that when it does set player variable for a number, you never pass this in, right? You never pass the type as a generic type. So you know that this must be an object, right? And so the object here, it says its start date and last collection. So I'm going to go and quickly adjust that. And let me also change the name of the group here. So that is store. Watch it say I already have it. Yeah. Cool. I hope I already have it so that I don't have to do all this portion. Let's go owned by me store. There it is. Add to world. Cool. So then we can just skip all that. But at least you got to see how I go through the rabbit hole sometimes. Added to the world. Cool. Daily rewards. Great. And I'm only seeing that one, so I'm hoping that one was the only one I need. I'm not seeing the one for shop. So let's use let's press play and just see what is happening from the jump, from just dragging them in. Really, I didn't have to do that variable group stuff to at least see this, right? So what it did was add these three icons to the top right of my screen. You'll see the console's like, hey, you're missing stuff, or you know, yeah, in this case, it's just talking about stuff that's missing, right? Which is totally fine. That's going to guide us as to what our next step is, right? But let's click around and see. So this is empty. That's the shop. This is daily rewards. It's also empty. And this is the inventory. Cool. Let's pick the shop. And what we're going to do is create a new IWP, right? So I'm just going through and creating in-world item. So it's that first option. I'm going to call it test. Test. I'm going to make it 25 credits because that's the minimum. So is determining whether I'm going to actually change the name to test currency, right? Because this is basically going to be my in-game coins. So let's call it in-game coins. But I often forget whether it's durable or I'm pretty sure it's durable. So let's leave it like that. If it's not, okay, we'll just change it. So let's look here at the properties of the shop, right? So here we can see we've got a couple entries here for soft currency. And then what I want you to notice here is for items that you're going to list in the shop, there's going to be the SKU, and we'll cover that here in a second. A thumbnail, the cost SKU, and the quantity, right? So that is what Pace talked about earlier with the idea of like things can cost meta credits and cost in-game credits and or, right? So let's open up our commerce again, and so we'll press this button right here, leftmost button on this commerce listing. It's copy SKU. So that's just that unique ID that represents that in-world purchase item. So let's select a random image. I have an image of my dog that I like to use. I think it's this one. So let's see what that, just with that, what do we get out of that? Might be nothing, but that's okay. Okay, we get something. So top right, you can see, oh, okay. So you can subtract from the player count. I was wondering, yeah, how, yeah, I forget. There is a line in the code that you can see where it actually affects the item itself. But here you can see the picture of my dog, and I have 0 of the credit. So that's good. There's something. Let's make an actual item though that we're going to sell, right? So let's go back in and we'll make a new one. This one can be durable. Yeah, I think that's the thing that always mixes me up. Pace is that the second thing can be durable. So we can say hat. It's a hat. That's 25 credits. And yeah, I'll leave it at that. Okay, so let's get our hat SKU. And we'll go back into our shop. And we'll put that hat SKU right there. This one, I'm going to use this picture of this little funky toy that we have in the house. I think it's this picture. And for the SKU here, the cost SKU, I want to make it cost in-game credits. And I'll say that it costs 100. Cool. So let's go in and let's see what that does. So cool. So you see here, it says 100. Can't click on it because I don't have that money. But yeah, you can see that it is ready for me to purchase. Basically, if I had 100, I could purchase it. Alternatively, we could even additionally, right? It doesn't even have to be alternative. We could just live there side by side. So we'll put that there. We'll say that cost. Actually, we don't put a cost, right? We don't put a cost there if we're using meta credits, if I'm not mistaken. So let's click and we'll see that it shows the 25 meta credits. And yeah, so that is seen that when that's, if that, is that already enabled, by the way? I think on mobile is you can buy with, if not, you see, right? I didn't have to put this one in here, right? So it wasn't going to ever show me the credits version. If you want, you could always enhance, it's just scripts, right? So you can always just enhance it to say, VR players can see the credit versions for now or anything like that, right? Something to note too, let's click on one of these UIs. Not that one. One of these. Yep. And you'll notice here, it is a screen overlay that is blocking, right? So that is going to, stop the player from moving, but it's interactive, right? So that is going to show up in the face of a VR player as well. If they have that, they're just going to see it, right? And they can interact with it. So let's move on here to this inventory. We're going to just set it up to be ready for the item, but we're not going to see it quite yet. What we are going to see these errors go away. That's kind of nice. Let's pick. So I copied that SKU for the hat, and I'm going to write image here, and I'm going to add that picture, right? So you'll see you basically have to keep defining it in these separate systems, right? That is kind of a downside, but I think that's nice because ultimately it makes it quite modular. But basically what we've done here is set it up so that it is ready for a quantity to appear, right? I guess in this case, it says use. I set it as durable though, so it's kind of, there's only going to be one, or maybe not. I don't know. It You can hook into that event, and I'll open that here in a bit. Kind of running out of time, so let me speed through this last portion. I don't want to hold y'all too long. So let's paste in that hat here. And this is our daily rewards asset. Okay. Let's clear the console just to make sure nothing else is wrong. Okay, so it's just saying that it hasn't set, but let's see. So when I click daily rewards, you'll see I have the, I'll have one for today. I can, what's going on here? I think it's the persistent variable. Oh, just a daily rewards, store daily rewards. Let's see. This one might be a leave and come back situation. So let's do that. Ooh, wall of text. Let's see. What do you share there? Here's some handy scripts to grant coins on grab. Awesome. Awesome script there, Pace. So yeah, keep that in y'all's records. Put that in a snippet somewhere. Yeah, that's cool. So check it. You'll see on that code that he shared, line 12, it talks about give coins to player, that function right there. That's happening on, let me see, when's that happening? On grab start. Line 13 says world inventory dot grant item to player. So to directly answer the question of how do you give the IWP to the player, it's that line of code right there, grant item to player. And so what I want to share also before we separate here is, let me share that world inventory API guide. So basically the demo that I've shown you so far with all those public assets, they're just leveraging that world inventory API guide, right? So that's just further reading if you want to get into the details there and make it do whatever you need it to do. Especially with the fact of, there might be, for the most part, this inventory feels very much stuff in the background, right? Consumables that you're using and they just kind of activate events in the background. But you may consider spawning an object too, right? So you're going to need to know where those points are to hook into. And that's what that link should help you find. So let's see if this daily rewards work. Okay, great. So I guess it claimed an Alassa, or potentially it's my variable group had like data already in it. Let's see, that might be the case. So let's take a look here. Last collected. So let's clear that. And actually, does that clear that? Let me just double check. Store here. Good, it's clear. And then we'll press play, daily rewards, and we'll claim it. Great. So that time it worked out. Just needed to leave the world and come back. You see, I get a little cute little pop-up here. And most importantly, I see when I'm able to get that reward next, right? So if I had all the days set up, right, I would see all the different items that I would get and know that, okay, if I come back tomorrow, I get the other one and so on and so forth. But when you check your inventory, wrong button, you can see now I have one, right? So what, now I can hook into that use button and do something when this happens. I think, it's kind of set up for consumables like I mentioned, but yeah, that you saw the little pop-up that says I used the item and still, the store is still the same. If I were to give myself currency, this would then become available if that was the thing I was rewarding myself with. As in I can use the soft currency SKU as a daily reward item, right? Let's see that real quick. Go into the shop. We'll take the soft SKU here, go to the daily rewards. Notice that there's a quantity too, right? So you can modify how many of the thing you get. In fact, I'm just going to change the first one. Let's do this. I'm going to paste this here for now. Oh, bad idea. Paste this here for now. Copy this. Put it over here. Take this one. Put it over there. Whoa. I'm stressing it out. Hang on a second. I'll give myself 100 currency and let's clear out my variable group for the daily reward. And just like, oh, it's fine. You see that it's basically just an object type. So that gets you, as long as you make it called daily rewards, it's in store, then the default behavior will work, right? And it's object. Let's go in and check the daily rewards. And it's still showing the other image, but that's because I needed to select the new image. But you see day 2 is there now available too, right? So if I claim this, That's going to give me 100 test currency, as you see right there. And now let's go look at our shop, right? Oh, shop didn't update. Why not? Interesting, interesting. I'm gonna leave and come back just just to see what happens. Okay, so I gave myself coins, right? Okay, that time it updated. So there's a little bit of a fuzziness there when it comes to like daily rewards and soft credits. So that might be something worth either bug reporting or trying to figure out, a workaround and figure out how to get that working. It's all custom UI and bindings at the end of the day, right? Nothing too out of the ordinary. So yeah, you can see here I can just buy with that soft currency. Let's see if by buying it actually updates. Maybe we might have found the root of the problem here. So we'll purchase this item here. Great. Yeah, see, so there's something fuzzy there, but yeah, worth looking into at some point. I'll probably take some time on that at some point later in the week. I didn't create this system. This is actually a Meta Horizon public asset. But yeah, the code is all there, so you can just read and figure it out. So hopefully one of us does and posts it and shares it and everybody's understands what's going on. So that is that system, right? That is the world inventory, basically IWPs as rewards. So leverage that, use that for your world, see if it makes sense for you. If you don't want to use all that system, the ones that are public assets, that line that paste shared with, giving them the granting the player inventory or the grant item to player from the world inventory API. That is that's your foundation of how to build that out some more. And just know that, the world inventory system is supported well in the, all right, I say supported well. I don't know too well about it. I know it's supported, it's visible in the mobile app itself. So like the player, if you've gone to those worlds where it gives you IWP, think the pet or a pet park, right? You have the pet in your literal inventory. That is where the players will see. So it's in a consistent location where across different worlds, they know how it works. So it's less onboarding, and it might be, that might be something you're interested in as far as your game design goes. So the only last thing I want to show you is that XP bar that I mentioned. That is a public asset there. You see broken ref, right? I mentioned earlier. Just create that new test script, and it should bring in the missing the missing script. So let's take a look at what that looks like. So that is this bar that you're seeing here at the top. Try to be thematically similar to the other UI items. But yeah, right now it just gives you random XP points, and that's because there's test data here, right? In reality, you're going to be calling the events that are visible inside the script. So when you dig into those scripts, you'll see those events available. Or sorry, I said events, but I mean functions that you can call. They're on a static utilities class. So you can just import that class, that utilities class. I'll open that here so you can see. But you can just for testing, you can set this to different numbers and see how it animates. You see? So let's what happens if we set it to 100. Actually, I didn't test that. So it'll be fun. Zoop. So cool. It hits 100. Um, the functions itself should make it turn yellow and reset it back to 0. If not, that's just something you can add to it. So that's the point of it, is just gives you more of an example of what you can do. Uh, but if it doesn't work totally for you, that version, then just make your own. Um, yeah, so I have the script open here. I just want to show you the file, this utils file here. This is the one that you're going to want to import. So let's see, do I import it here? Yeah, so you just import it that, and then to use the functions on it, you can just call them simply that, right? Set XP progress or reset player HUD, right? And so there's different functions that you can see level things at. Yeah, cool. Great. And that's what I'm currently using in Lance too. So working with Immortal on the update for Lance. So that is basically the same system. Cool. That's all I got. Let me just double check for any remaining questions. Where did you grab that utils file? So that was when I dragged out this XP bar asset here, that, you know, has two thumbs up and one thumbs down, uh, you can uh, uh, you can see the utils file gets pulled in with that asset. If it doesn't, then just make a test script. Um, and yeah, it should come along with it. Well, thank you all so much for coming. I will see you next time.